I just want to welcome everybody tonight to our Parent, Guardian, and Speaker series. And our topic tonight is fun and functional activities to help your child learn and grow. The Down Syndrome Network of Montgomery County's mission is to empower and support individuals with Down syndrome, their families, and the community through education, information, public awareness, and advocacy. I have a few housekeeping tips for tonight. Please stay on mute during the presentation. We welcome cameras on so that we can see participants, but if you want to keep your camera off, that's perfectly fine. Please use the chat feature or raise your hand using the reaction tab to ask questions. Because we are such a small group tonight, if you have a question, please feel free to hop on or interrupt the speaker and ask your questions so that you don't forget it. That's one of the advantages of having a small group, is that we can be much more personal. For closed captions, click on live transcript and then show subtitles. Try to keep your questions general, but again, we're a small group, so use your judgment. And at the end of the evening, I will put this evaluation form in the chat, and we just ask people to complete the evaluation so we know what you thought about our presentation. And then very briefly, so with us tonight, we are so lucky to have Denise and Ashley, both from TLC. Denise is a pediatric speech language pathologist at TLC. She has 29 years of experience working with children and families with complex communication needs. And I've learned she was very involved with the Down Syndrome Clinic at Vanderbilt, and you'll hear more about that. Ashley has enjoyed being a pediatric OT since she graduated from University of Maryland with her bachelor's degree in kinesiology and Nova Southeastern University with a master's in OT. She currently works with children of all ages. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn the presentation over to Denise and Ashley.
Great. Everybody can see my slides?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So welcome to everyone. I'm just seeing if I can get this to progress to go to the next slide. There it is. So I'm Denise, and I just want to welcome everyone. I'm really glad that we have the diversity of ages represented of your kids, because we're definitely going to be talking about all the principles we're talking about are going to apply to very young children all the way up to high school and obviously young adults too. So I think the principles can be applied to all ages. So I think you'll find it really interesting. And as she said, you can jump on and ask any questions. You don't have to wait to the end. I see children with motor speech disorders, language impairments, autism, Down syndrome, and I see children all ages, and I do evaluations with adults too. My specialty area is augmentative and alternative communication, so we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's individuals who need sign language or picture boards or an actual speech generating device that might help them with their communication. But I also just do regular motor speech disorders, which all of our kids with Down syndrome have motor speech disorders, and other kinds of therapy too. And as she said, I moved here this summer from Nashville, and I was part of the multidisciplinary team, Down syndrome clinic team at the Children's Hospital at Vanderbilt. And so we saw lots and lots of individuals with Down syndrome. So it's one of my areas that I'm really passionate about. And I'll let Ashley go.
Thank you, Denise. So I've gotten a pop-up twice that my internet is unstable since we started. So if I cut out, Denise, if you don't mind letting me know, because I won't know. Okay. It's nice to meet everybody. Thank you for being here. We know that you have a really busy day and it's later in the week, in the afternoon. So I really appreciate everyone that's here. My name is Ashley. I'm an occupational therapist. I have been an occupational therapist at TLC for 3 years. So I've been working in pediatrics for 3 years. but I knew that I was going to end up working with kids before I even started college because I am a sibling of a child with disabilities. It's a little more rare and not as well known as Down syndrome, but definitely they had a lot of similar traits that we had to learn how to help support and help my brother be as successful as possible. And we went to occupational therapists and speech therapists. So I knew this is a population that I was very passionate about pretty much my whole life. So I actually spent more time in schools, classrooms, daycare programs, after school programs with children with neurodiversity than I did in like typical settings. So it's where my heart is. So I'm very excited to be here and hope that you guys can take away just one thing. And like Denise said, since it is a small group, if you guys have any specific questions or thoughts, anything at all, please feel free to write in the chat and I have it up. So we'll try to answer it as soon as we can. So we both work at the Treatment and Learning Centers. We're in Rockville, Maryland, off of Gaither Road. Some pictures here are of our sensory motor gyms, which is honestly a small part of our office, but this is where we usually spend the most of our time with our younger kids, obviously. We work on everything here from gross motor, fine motor, social interaction skills. We try to have the kids play together as much as possible. Outside of here, there's a kitchen where sometimes we'll work on life skills, cooking, we work on dressing skills, hygiene, showering, pretty much any occupation or activity that a child has to focus on throughout their day, we can address here. And then when they're a little bit older and transitioning out of school and maybe going to an independent living environment or getting ready for a job, we have an outcomes department on the other side of the building where they help older, I think, Denise, do you know how old? I think it's 18 and older, right?
18 and older.
Yeah, so they start working at the age of 18. So we work with individuals across the lifespan for every skill or activity that they could imagine. So we also have counseling and tutoring. I mentioned audiological service.
Oh, she cut out.
Of a summer camp program coming up, and we're starting to register soon, but it is a wonderful summer camp. It has a lot of professionals that have all kinds of backgrounds and trainings, how to work with children with different neurodivergent diagnoses. So I've done it myself and Denise is going to do it this summer. So definitely reach out to us if you're interested in a summer program or if you have any questions at all.
Great. Okay, so we're going to jump in. Ashley and I are going to be talking specifically about communication skills and sensory motor skills, but we always want to be thinking about the big picture with the children that we serve. And definitely children with Down syndrome, there's some big picture things that are going to be giving us insight into their developmental profiles. One of those is medical history. A lot of our kids have had heart problems. Half of children with Down syndrome born with a congenital heart defect. So if you have a child who might have had their very early years where they've been in the hospital and they had heart surgeries, they haven't had the same sensory experiences, sensory motor experiences, communication experiences as other kids. Also medically, we have a lot of children with digestive issues. So children with reflux, constipation, you probably have dealt with that if you have a child with Down syndrome, one or the other. And that just influences their comfort level. And even constipation, I have some kids who it'll influence just how willing they are to move their bodies and to be mobile or even to sit down. I had a kid who didn't want to sit down in therapy and we realized he was constipated. And so we think it was like he wasn't following the direction, but that wasn't it at all. His body didn't feel good. He was uncomfortable. So that's something to be thinking about. Sleep apnea, there's a higher incident of that with children with Down syndrome. So it's important to be aware of that and to know that that can influence a child's attention and learning skills. Hearing and vision, both of those, we know there can be hearing and vision differences in children with Down syndrome. So we want to make sure that we have that assessed and that we know if there's children, if they didn't come with their glasses, to be aware of that, so that we're not asking them to do tasks if their glasses were broken at school that day, just to be sensitive to that. And always, like on the outside of charts, I always have if a child has hearing aids or glasses, just as a reminder to me, so that I'm taking that into account when I'm doing tasks with them. Feeding difficulties, a lot of our children have feeding difficulties, and I'm going to talk about some of the oral motor characteristics that will influence that. And then some of our children have a dual diagnosis of autism, which just gives us more insight into their developmental profile. And then in terms of specific speech and language characteristics of children with Down syndrome, as I said, oral motor structures are different and function. So in terms of structures, they might have a small upper jaw, maybe a high arch palate. So they might have enlarged tonsils and not as big of an oral cavity. So their tongue has a more forward resting posture, and that's going to influence their speech. And then oral motor function, the actual physiology is also going to be different in terms of having low muscle tone, maybe difficulty with weakness or incoordination of their oral motor skills. And that influences feeding, as we talked about, but it also influences their speech or articulation. So we're always, my goal with all of my kids with Down syndrome is to have understandable speech most of the time. And that's just a really good goal. But there's some times where we don't have understandable speech all of the time. And that's why we use a lot of AAC. And AAC is augmentative and alternative communication. And that's using sign language, visual supports, picture boards, giving them picture choices of what they want is a way to help them to be able to express themselves if they can't do it verbally. And I'll be showing you some picture symbol supports that you can use during different activities at home, the kinds of things you can make that's helpful for our kids. Receptive language overall is stronger than expressive language, and receptive language, that's their language comprehension, what they're understanding. So a lot of our kids with Down syndrome, and these are generalities, but overall, they understand more than they're able to express verbally. And overall, we see difficulties with phonology and syntax more than other areas of language. So phonology is speech sounds, learning the speech sounds that go into words. And then syntax is the rules of combining words. So they might have a hard time using past tense verbs or using question forms. And so those are things that we'll really target in therapy. And then we'll let Ashley talk about the sensory and motor characteristics.
Okay, so for considerations specific to occupational therapy, I think if you have a younger child in school, most people think of occupational therapy and their exposure goes as far as OTs in the school system, and they might work on handwriting and seating and things like that, but that's as far as they are able to reach. Whereas in an outpatient setting like what we are in, we're able to focus on gross motor skills, which affects every single part of their life, fine motor skills, their sustained attention to one task at a time before moving on to the next, understanding when a task begins and how to know when it ends and move on to the next one. Transition skills, if your child has a hard time understanding, it's time for us to stop this activity because we have to leave or we have to move on to the next one. We work on strategies to help you with that at home. I mentioned life skills, obviously being independent in dressing, self-feeding, toileting, showering. These are all skills that we help them to learn in a way that's specific to each child. It's not going to be the same, and it's definitely not one size fits all. That's why occupational therapy is so great, is that it's always client-centered, and we always learn about the family first, the environments that the child is in, and the child themselves to see what works for them, because something that works for one child is not going to work for another, and we always understand that and come from that perspective. Being a little more specific to children with Down syndrome, so one characteristic that we learn about in school is understanding that they will have generalized muscle tone from birth, right? So their muscles and their joints might be a little bit more lax and flexible. And so that will impact every single thing that they do in life, because if they want to move safely across their environment, going down from a curb onto the parking lot, up into a car, if those joints are not stable and they aren't able to complete coordinated movements with strength and precision, then they could be risking an injury. So that's something that we practice, not maybe coming in and out of a car, but we would have them practice coming in and out of a suspended swing or something a little bit more fun, obviously. So we work on those gross motor skills to make sure that they establish that core strength, the joint stability, all the things they need to then move on to those higher level or more challenging skills like handwriting. So we need that core strength to be able to sit in a chair for a long period of time and not fall over or need to get up and wiggle in order to even write a sentence. So we work on those gross motor skills in the gyms, and then we'll go to the offices and work on the more fine motor skills, or we might go to the bathroom to work on toileting and sequencing. Going back to what Denise was mentioning, we use visual charts so that we, instead of verbally telling them, okay, now do this and do this, which can be hard to receive, we'll have visual steps of each step. Sometimes we won't even use words. We'll just have them point to each one, or if they want to use a Velcro visual schedule and rip it off and then put it on once they finish. We practice all of those things together, and then we send them home with you guys and train or meet over Zoom and talk about, okay, how can we make this a reality and applicable to your life and your bathroom and your everyday schedule, those types of skills. So we work on gross motor, fine motor, sustained attention is across the board. And then what I am the most passionate about is sensory integration, and obviously social skills and mental health as well. Those are all aspects that make up your child, and we find just as important as handwriting and their success in school is, are they getting that social participation? Are they able to express when they're happy in a positive and safe way? Are they able to express to you how they're feeling when they're frustrated because these things are hard? These are all things that we would work on with them every week, and hopefully we can share some things that you can start to do with them as well.
Perfect.
So just a very quick review of our agenda. So we tried to think about how we could break down each domain of what we're going to talk about in a very easily digestible way. So first we're going to define the area that we're talking about, whether it's gross or fine motor and what that means. And then we're going to talk about what skills that you're working on and addressing, the why to what we're doing. And then underneath, we'll talk about the what of what you're doing. So, okay, great. We're working on gross motor. We know what it means. These are the skills that you're developing, but how do I recreate this at home? And again, if you guys have any questions about, well, what would this look like in my home? How do I do this with things that I have in my home? We would love to dive into that as well. So please feel free to ask questions as they come.
All right, so we're going to start with play, and play is defined as any spontaneous or organized child-directed activity that's an interaction between the child and environment. It provides enjoyment, entertainment, amusement, diversion. And we've all heard that play is the work of children. It's very true. We're very play-based in everything that we do. Some of the skills that we can address when we're doing play with children, play-based therapy, is turn taking. And that works on, like Ashley talked about, impulse control. But at the same time, when we're thinking about children who were some of those beginning signs, my turn, your turn, I'll go, wait, all these great signs and things that they can learn, doing turn taking and play, regulating their emotions, understanding the rules of the game, winning and losing, being able to express about that, making decisions about games. Definitely receptive language, following directions is really important part of play. And there's lots of vocabulary with play. So that's the best thing. You can just, if you're playing with, the farm animals or the zoo animals, you have all those words, but even more important, all the action words and describing words and prepositions about where are you going to put them. So there's lots of opportunities to model vocabulary and teach vocabulary using play. And then at-home activities that I think are great to do play is you don't have to necessarily have a lot of extra things, but you can do a lot of dramatic play and dress up. I love pretending and acting things out, using board games and card games, doing Simon Says is a great like following direction ones, and it's a great way if you just have like need a filler time, like playing little imitation games like Simon Says. So that's a great thing too to work on. And I brought just a couple of visual supports for play. So since we talked about visual supports, I think that sometimes if we can, when we talk about the rules, sometimes it can be a lot. So I do a lot of showing them. So even like red light, green light with this visual support, hopefully you can see that, where I'll show that to them, like, red light stop, green light go. Sometimes just verbally, they may not do it. So if we're like working on running down the hall and following the direction, like red light means stop, green light means go, that's a really fun one to do. I have like full like social scripts about like, how do we play hide and seek? We're going to count, then we're going to, our friends are going to hide, then we're going to go look for them. Simon Says, sometimes they can't, they'll always do the same one. So I come up with like whole little sheets of things that they can do when it's their turn to do Simon Says, and be giving the directions. And it just empowers them, because then it's not, they're getting that good social interaction, which we're going to talk about, but they aren't having to like feel like they're not able to participate because they can't think of different motor activities that they can do. So that's a really good choice board for them. And then even things like for Go Fish, like there's visual supports. And all these kind of visual supports, if you just Google visual supports, visual support for playing Uno, visual support for whatever your game is, you can find them online very easily on Pinterest, or just there's so many therapists and people who've done visual supports that you can just print them for free when you look them up. Do you have anything, other ideas, Ashley, related to play?
Yes. Absolutely. So the most important thing I wanted to mention was, we believe, especially if your child is younger, but honestly, if you're an adult as well, anything can be turned into play. And we highly encourage that you take that perspective. If your child has something that's non-preferred, like clipping their nails or taking a bath, anything that they absolutely hate, turning into play is my number one suggestion for parents. And it can be as simple as putting on their favorite song when they're doing it and you're singing along, or bath time. There's colorful shampoos that are like paints that they can paint on the walls, and it's soap, so it comes off, of course. But just turning any activity into play not only motivates them and interests them, but actually makes them want to practice it more. So I do nothing but play when someone comes to see me, even when we're practicing like sorting, dishes after they come out of the dishwasher, we turn it into a game. Oh, let's put on this visual timer. Let's see if we can put all the forks away before it's out. Things like that. Or let's race to the car, or see if we can hop like a bunny to the car. The smallest thing can be turned into play if you make it either a challenge, or bring in the child's interest, or put on a song, just making it more sensory based, whether it's with colors or tactile things. Anything can be turned into play. And that's my first suggestion if something is very difficult or non-preferred for any child.
Perfect. Okay, now we're going to talk about self-care routines and activities of daily living. And ADLs is what we say for short for activities of daily living. And a lot of times my littles will say, our families of, really little kids will be like, self-care, activities of daily living. We have to do so much for them. But the earlier you start thinking in this way, the better, about ways that they can be more independent. And self-care skills are just the everyday tasks that they do all day long. And there's so much learning that's involved in that, and opportunities for language and to build their sensory motor skills. So take advantage of that time. You don't have to have like a special time where you're working on your speech and language goals necessarily. You can just do it within the regular routine activities. One of the things to remember though is that if there are times where there's time pressure and like you have to get out the door. So if their goal is for them to, brush their teeth independently or get dressed independently, it may not be the time to practice that, or is when there's a time pressure, because everybody's just going to end up frustrated. So a lot of times I'll say practice some of those routines when it's not a time dependent on you getting out the door. So just, a Saturday morning, or just like after school, practice some of the routine of what they're going to do the next morning, like do a little role play or practicing that, because we don't want to set ourselves up to be frustrated by that. Some of the same skills, following directions, receptive language, requesting help. That's a huge one. I want kids to be able to ask for help and be able to ask questions when they're doing their self-care routines and just any activity that I give them. I want them to be able to request that they want a break and that this is too much. And so, that's a huge thing. So even my kids who use like augmentative and alternative communication, I want them to always have something that says, I need a break. I need a drink of water. I don't want to do this anymore. They need to be able to advocate for themselves if something is too much for them. So that's important to remember. And self-care and all of these are really helpful for like managing time. That's a big skill for our kids. So like a visual schedule. So much of this helps. This really is conducive to using visual schedules, like the Good Karma apps. I would put that one on there. But you could have visual schedules that cover the whole day. Like we're going to go to school, we wake up, we get ready, we go to school, we come home, we do different things. But then you could have a visual schedule that's just within each of those activities. So like this one is the good night routine. I take a bath, I dry off, I brush my teeth, pajamas. And at first you can have it on the visual schedule that you showed them. And then over time, they can do it more independently. And then that way you're not having to prompt them through every single step. You can say, look at your schedule. Go, have you done everything that you need to do? Go look at your schedule and see. And they can look at that and tell you if they've done all the different things. And I'll do ones for older kids too. So like this one's for like older kids, like chores, like things that they can do to help, like washing dishes, laundry, wiping the table, like identifying things that they're really good at. And then they can have that extra visual about what they're supposed to be doing. And then just the only other thing I say about this, just in terms of time things, I think it's really important to give our kids access to calendars and planners once they're in middle school up. So just so that they can start to take responsibility and have a sense of things that they've done and when it's coming, like they flip forward and they see the activities that are coming up. That helps with just overall time concepts, but it helps them organize. And that's going to be like a job skill for them to be able to manage that and to be able to look at a calendar and know which days that they need to go into work. So all of these things, they seem little when they're, little skills, but we're building all these skills because we want them to become independent adults or as independent as possible. Other ideas, Ashley?
Yes, I was going to say, so OTs obviously work on self-care routines and ADLs a lot. That's kind of our bread and butter. So two kind of take-home thoughts that I always start with when we're doing self-care routines and ADLs, because they can be highly non-preferred for any child. They're kind of like, why am I doing this when you can do it for me? So in order to increase their motivation, we'll often have them do these things on, so if it's like brushing their hair in the morning and you feel like you have to do it to make sure it's thorough, we'll make it playful and easier. It's always easier for the child to do it on someone or something else before they do it on themselves. So before we start having them practice putting on their shirt by themselves, we'll have them practice putting a shirt on a doll, because it's easier when it's right in front of them than when it's on their own body, when they're still learning where their body is in space. Or oftentimes we'll have them have like a rice bucket, like a sensory bucket of just uncooked rice with pom-poms and cut up little craft materials, and we'll have a spoon. If they're having a trouble bringing food to their mouth, instead of saying, okay, keep practicing, okay, come on, do it better, while they're eating, like Denise said, where it's high stress and high demand, just having them pick up some sand or rice and then pour it out, and just practicing the skill without any expectation or stress of it.
Definitely.
Yeah, awesome. We have someone in the, sorry, I was distracted by that. I stopped talking all of a sudden, but there's someone in the chat as well. Katie said it helps to have a big calendar for the whole family, color coded, so we can help each other remember what we need to do and what we plan. Ours stays in the kitchen where we are most of the time. We have used them for many, many years and really like our big calendar. That's awesome. That is an amazing idea. Visuals are key.
That's great.
Okay, so sensory motor and gross motor skills. What does that mean? Sensory, obviously, meaning we know our five senses, but there's other senses as well. They're kind of the hidden senses that OTs learn about and teach our parents about. And those are proprioception, vestibular, and interoception, and the names are not that important. What they mean are what helps the child understand what they're feeling in their body, where they are in space. So we can't have them start practicing self-dressing if they don't understand that their hand is up here as opposed to down here, or their shoes are all the way down there. When they understand where their body is in space, they will understand how to coordinate movements better. Or if they don't understand what it feels like to have the pressure in their stomach when they have to go to the bathroom versus the pressure in their stomach when they're hungry, then they might just get really frustrated and grumpy because they don't know what they're feeling, so they don't know what they're asking for. So they'll just be very upset and uncomfortable. And that's something we work on as well, is learning those bodily systems and how to tell the difference, and then how to ask for help when we feel those things. So that's the sensory part. It's the information they're taking in. And then the motor part is the output behavior. So that is also something that OTs work on as well. And luckily the speeches help us. They take them into the gym to also work on those skills. Something that's a big takeaway from this is how easy it is to do these activities that we do in an outpatient setting, also at home. So we obviously have this huge equipment in our gym, and parents are like, okay, well, that's great, but how am I supposed to do this at home? And I will send pictures to my families of how to take couch cushions or throw pillows and line them up on the floor with about 2 feet a distance apart, and then just have your child hop with both feet together over the pillow. And you can have puzzle pieces on one side and then the puzzle board on the other. And one at a time, they grab a piece and put it into the board. So they're doing it over and over. That's working on so many skills that will help them with tasks later in life. And it's pool noodles. But I'll tell parents, take a bunch of sheets from your bed or towels and take, my internet is unstable. Am I
We hear you
okay?
now. Yeah,
Okay.
you're good.
I'll tell them to take an ottoman that has a space under it, or a table, or chairs around your dining room, and then make forts, long tunnels, and put the blankets over, and then have them crawl under back and forth, again, with pieces to a toy on one side, and then the base of the toy on the other, and just say, all right, grab two, bring them over. And I have kids that take up the full 45 minutes because they're having so much fun just doing that one task. And they might be exhausted, but they still want to keep going. So there's so many things that you guys can do at home as well. And if anyone has questions about that, please write it in the chat or let us know. Yeah, that is what we would work on with gross motor skills.
Yeah. And I feel like, like Ashley said, we're doing a lot of our speech and language therapy in those gyms too, because there's so much carryover of what I can work on within those gross motor activities. One of the things is motor imitation. I always like to just emphasize with families that motor imitation comes before vocal imitation. So developmentally, so it's really important that they understand imitating motor movements. And it could be just play movements that we're doing, like that are big gross motor movements, are going to be easier maybe than the fine motor movements. And so they can be a little bit more successful imitating some of that gross motor play in the gym. Also, when Ashley was talking about like sequencing several motor activities, that's very good developmentally. And there's been some research on children who can sequence several different like motor things. They're keeping that in their auditory memory, that those kids, it helps them with word combinations, because what we're doing is the whole idea of word combinations. When we're saying sentences, we're having to remember this whole sequence of words to put together and put those together in novel ways. And so if they can do that with motor things, it's challenging their brain to practice that. So I do a ton of what she talked about, where it might be that we jump on the I might tell them, I need you, this is an auditory memory task, where I need you to jump on the trampoline 3 times, crawl through the tunnel, And then you're going to, I might have like a little pretend play thing where we are going to put one of the cookies in the toy oven. And then we come back. So now how many times are we going to jump on the trampoline? So there's been some time delay in them following that direction. They have to come back and remember, oh, I have to jump 3 times. And then what are you going to do? I'm going to crawl through the tunnel. And that seems easy to us, but that's like a 3-part direction. And that is really good for them to be able to follow. Plus it's active learning. And when our whole body is active, then we're going to be remembering things a lot better. And when we are actively learning, that I get a lot more verbalizations from kids. When we just sit, they kind of have a tendency just, if we're just sitting at the table the whole time, they can be a little bit more passive. And so if you're moving, then there's more active learning going on, which increases their verbalizations. The other thing I just have to say, because I haven't talked about literacy yet, and I feel like book reading is so important for kids. I mean, if I had one thing that I could tell families to do, and especially when I was at the Down syndrome clinic, the kids of all ages, I would be just go to the library every week and have a special library bag and get books and read books. And books give you so many good ideas about play. So you'll read these stories and then you're like, oh, we just act out this story. You don't have to be this super creative parent because the books will create that for you. So I just brought like a couple, like Mrs. Wishy-Washy. These are great little books. And there's Mr. Wishy-Washy, Mrs. Wishy-Washy. And like the animals go and get in the mud. So if I read this book, then we're doing a bunch of sensory motor and gross motor play where we're taking those animals and we're like literally mixing up like pretend mud, like maybe brown tempera paint. And then the animals are going in there and then they're dirty. And then we're going over to the sink and we're cleaning the animals because that's what was in the story. So you can do like a lot of really great language. Pigeon Needs a Bath is another one. Like there's really cute stories. Dragons Love Tacos. Like I'll do this story for a little bit older kids. And then we'll pretend to make tacos. We'll cut up paper, which is great sensory, like cut strips of paper and fold them to be the cheese, like make all the taco things and like make pretend tacos on a folded paper plate. So you can, like, I don't have to come up with any of that. I just like read a book and then out of the book comes all these natural ways to get your body moving and be creative. So utilize books as your kind of springboard for thinking of fun activities for the kids.
So I know we are coming up on time and we did want to save a little bit of time at the end if anyone had any specific questions, but very quickly, social participation. So we all know what social participation is, so I won't spend too much time defining it, but some of the more specific things that we work on are identifying the parts of social participation that children have. Each child obviously is going to experience different barriers, but there are some commonalities across different diagnoses. And something that we would work on with a child with Down syndrome is when they're becoming very frustrated about something and maybe they don't know in the moment how to express it or remove themselves. That's why we would be there. And what I also implore you guys to do as well is make that social participation or that social interaction an opportunity for them to practice moving away from the space, checking in with themselves and talking through how they're feeling without any demand or expectation for them to return, because sometimes that's the skill itself. So we work on a lot of emotional identification. That's another skill that visuals is so important. I have a big poster in my room with different feelings. And sometimes we just don't have the language for feelings. So in the moment when you're like, what's wrong? What are you feeling? Why are you mad? They might just be like, I don't know. Like, what do you want me to say right now? But if you show them a picture and go, which one are you feeling? Just point. Let's point. I feel this. What do you feel? And right there, that opened the door for them to just go, what do I feel? I don't know. I'm just mad and I'm hitting something, right? So that's a lot of the social participation work that we do in the clinic. And I also encourage parents to do at home. If they're frustrated, amazing opportunity for you guys to move away from the situation, connect, and just praise them for taking a second and being like, oh, okay, this made me mad, or whatever it is. And then you're like, fantastic. Thank you for telling me that. That would make me mad too. Just naming the feeling and understanding what it feels inside of them. Down the road, we talk about coping strategies, what helps them, what they can do when they're upset. But sometimes just learning the emotions that you feel in a natural social environment is enough and is plenty and is everything. And sometimes we as adults don't have that. So another thing that we work on and I encourage at home as well is if you feel like they have a hard time in a social situation with peers doing certain things, whether it's taking turns on a playground or sharing toys, simulating or role playing or, recreating those exact situations at home when it's just you and them because you have space for their feelings, and then naming what they did. I love that you were able to wait for your turn. Thank you. And then generalizing those skills with peers instead of trying to encourage or cue them in the situation with the peer where they might skills with just the child and then move on to putting them in a social situation after. I'm getting the connection unstable
Once
side
again,
again.
yeah,
You're okay.
yeah, you're good.
Okay.
I was just going to jump in and say also, kids with Down syndrome are very visual learners. That's a strength of theirs, and that's why the visual supports work so well for them. Like they getting that information, they hear it, and think about too. A lot of them have to hear. We talked about that there might be a hearing loss component for some kids, and so they could hear it, but if they hear it and see it, it helps so much. And so I give a lot of respect to them because they are like a lot of my families will say that the kids will watch for a while and they don't have to jump in right away. I think that's part of their learning is to be observant of a social interaction for a while. So if like they're at a birthday party and they're not like jumping in immediately, it's because they're learning by watching and seeing the different interactions of kids, and then they can practice that. That's how their skill building is, by watching and observing. So to just be respectful of that and give them time to do that, I think is important. And then the other, just the other things, there are some fun things like for the older kids, conversation topic bags are really fun. Definitely role playing. I do a lot of that. Social stories, once again, like Google and Pinterest are your friends. You could just like look up a social story for anything and pretty much find it. I mean, we want them to be more personalized. We don't want to like in general use like things that were made for another child, but you can find some good ideas of the structure of ways to do things. And even like they have videos now out. I mean, you could just look up and just always preview ahead of time before showing a child and make sure it fits their scenario. But a lot of therapists have like posted YouTube videos of like, this is, children sharing or taking turns going down the slide. And a lot of them don't even have like words that go with them. And a child could just watch. Once again, you're giving them that opportunity to observe and kind of internalize what their demands are going to be when they're actually in that social situation.
I also just wanted to add very quickly, I'll put it in the chat, but some other great resources if you want to look into social stories yourself. YouTube, honestly, looking up social story toileting, social story birthday party, and it goes through the steps of what someone might go through, or social story doctor's appointment, right? These things that children might have trouble with or might be anxious about, they have every possible video for it. And sometimes removing the pressure from themselves and looking at this other child going through it opens up the opportunity for them to go, why is she scared? Why is she crying? And you can talk to them about, well, when we go, it might be a little bit, you might be nervous too. Like, let's practice it. Also, teachers pay teachers. If you don't know about it, it's not just for teachers. And also there's a button on the left corner where you can click free, and then everything that's free pops up and you can just download it. And it does have social stories. You can print out templates, but it also has activities and games and every resource that you could want. So definitely recommend that as well.
This one is a freebie from Teachers Pay Teachers, and this is a great little social skills, like asking little survey questions. I do a lot of this where like we'll think of a survey questions, which hot weather activity is your favorite? We've been doing which cold activity is your favorite, and might have different choices. And then they can like walk around the center and ask different friends that they run into, or ask the people at the front desk. And then they can like, it could become a math activity where they tally how many people like to build snowman versus drink hot chocolate. And all of like, that's just free on Teachers Pay Teachers. And these are great like conversation starters, like to use even at the dinner table. Like, I wonder which ice cream favorite, you know, everybody's going to vote. What is their favorite ice cream flavor? So it's great for vocabulary. Survey questions are just really a fun way to get them practicing asking questions, responding to questions, making choices, all good social skills. So thanks for reminding me about Teachers Pay Teachers, Ashley.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I know we only have 1 minute. Thank you everybody for coming and attending. Obviously, feel free to email us questions or write it in the chat. But thank you again for staying. We know it's a late hour on a weeknight. We appreciate you being here.